Carlton Town TV, sponsored by Aerocom UK. And I'm here with a special guest today, which is obviously a privilege. Welcome Colin, Fray to Carlton Town.
Thank you very much, thanks for having me.
Well, I think the easiest way to intro it is something that the chairman at Carlton just asked me to ask you about, which is that it isn't your first time here. You have graced this hallowed pitch yourself.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me a bit about that, please?
I can tell you what I can remember of it, because it was a little while ago when I was young enough to be able to play football, although even then not on a regular basis. But yeah, I played here in a charity game, which the BBC had a part in organising. We had some ex-pros down here, and we had some of the guys who I work with doing commentary now. Steve Sutton was one manager. Forgive me, I can't remember who the other manager was. But we had Forest and Notts County kits, so one team was playing in Forest kit, the other team was playing in Notts kit. Steve Hodge was playing for Notts. I was playing for Forest, up front with Nigel Jepson, who was not happy because I couldn't pass the ball to save my life, and I kept trying to pass him the ball and couldn't, and he was getting more and more angry. And yeah, I mean, I can't remember the score or anything. I can remember that I hit a shot that went about 30 yards wide.
So you weren't on the score sheet?
I was not on the score sheet, but I distinctly remember Steve Sutton yelling at me at one point early in the second half, "Oi, Fray, take the caravan off!" Which I thought was rather rude, to be honest. But, you know, I've forgiven him.
Yeah. I'm sure you've probably had some similar comments from managers you've interviewed over the time. But obviously, it's good you were wearing a Forest kit that day. And obviously, you've spent 32 great years commentating for Forest now. But how did you get into that in the first place? Because it's not something that I've very often heard you talk about, how you got into commentary itself.
Long story, which I'll try and keep short. Basically, when I was a kid, and when I was, I say kid, when I was in secondary school and stuff, I used to kind of, I know this sounds a bit corny and horrible, but I used to, when we were playing football as kids and teenagers or whatever, on the pitch after school, I used to commentate on it. And one or two of my mates said, "Oh, you can do that. You're really good at that. That sounds really good." Of course, thought nothing of it. Had no idea what I was going to do when I finished school. Was working for Thomas Cook selling foreign money, foreign exchange. And I saw an advert for BBC were doing it jointly with Foster's Lager in the days when the BBC could do things like that. And it was to find the amateur commentator of the year. And all you had to do was record on an old cassette, which you probably don't even know what it looks like because you're too young. An old cassette machine, record a bit of you doing commentary, and that's what I did. I did 10 minutes off a video, which again you won't know what is. Off a video.
I just had an easy life.
Of Forest Luton in the Littlewoods Cup final in 1989. Did 10 minutes, which included a couple of goals. Sent it off. Got through to the Midlands finals, which was 8 people, won that, got through to the national finals, the Midlands champion, and ended up winning that as well. So I became the amateur commentator of the year for 1991, and soon after that, because it was a BBC competition, they got in touch with Radio Nottingham and said, "Look, there's this guy on your patch who's just won this, might be worth you having a listen and getting him in," which they did, and that's where it led from.
And so the enjoyment began. I mean, obviously we're going to do a short version of what you're doing inside there, because if you haven't paid to be here, sorry guys. Like you were saying inside, obviously it was a long time waiting for Wembley. When you first started out, obviously kind of just missed out. So talk to me about that start, and then obviously the glory that is now.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long old time. My first game that I got for Forest for Radio Nottingham was when they beat Chelsea 7-0, just ahead of the FA Cup final in 1991. But I wasn't full-time staff then, so I wasn't covering every game at that point, and that meant I wasn't doing the cup final. So I missed the cup final that year. And what I was doing a lot at that time was freelance reporting for a lot of other stations, quite often at the City Ground, because it was in the days before they had their own teams established, teams of commentators established, that is. and so they just used to look for a local guy to go to the City Ground or Meadow Lane or wherever it might be and work for them, just for that day. So I was doing a lot of that for the following season, as well as bits and bobs for Radio Nottingham. And then I got a full-time job early in 1993, so I've been full-time since '93. And of course, around about that time is the time when Forest didn't get to Wembley anymore. So yeah, when I joined in '93, it was like, well, they were there in '92, and they were there in 1990, and they were there a couple of times in 91, and then a couple of times in 90, a couple of times in 89. So it won't be long before I get to Wembley with Forest. And it took 30 years. So it was well worth waiting for, though. It was a fantastic day. And now, I think we're seeing certainly some of the best football and the best times in that whole 30-odd years.
When the fixtures got released for this season, obviously following in the end, a very exciting and positive end to last year, despite what a table may say. Obviously, the end of last year was phenomenal, but the fixtures get released this year, and might have looked a tad tough on us.
Just a bit.
However, 8th in the Premier League right now. Could you have envisaged that? And you must have had a lot of fun so far this year doing that. I mean, the victory, obviously, at Chelsea is one that probably I don't think many would have penned. No,
that was a good day. A fantastic defensive performance after scoring a very good goal, and a surprise, perhaps a surprise 3 points, a bonus 3 points. But I think in those ridiculous set of away fixtures. I did a podcast with Chris Cohen the other week, and he said they must have been picked by a Derby fan, which kind of sums it up really. But I thought they acquitted themselves okay at Arsenal, particularly second half. They were a bit timid in the first half, but second half they had a bit of a go. Obviously, Manchester United was Manchester United with all the controversies after going 2-0 up in 4 minutes. I was like, what is happening here? And then they get the win at Chelsea, so they've acquitted themselves. And we're talking on the eve of a game against Manchester City, so who knows what might happen there. So I'm just going to put that caveat in. But away from home so far, they've acquitted themselves well, got the win under their belts early. And I think they're showing some promising signs early in the season. Okay, some might have been disappointed with a draw at home to Burnley, but I think you look at the new players that were being bedded in, you look at the new formation that was being kind of rekindled, if you like. I think there's some promising things there about Forest, and certainly they're building from a more stable platform than they were last season.
Well, as long as we can keep peace tomorrow, because I am a Man City supporter, I know you won't remember that from the first time we spoke, but I appreciated all of your complimentary comments indoors. I've heard you obviously do these speakers evenings a couple of times before, and obviously you've helped me out with one of mine, and you're fantastic at them. You've come today to Carlton, small club, non-league. Do you enjoy coming to non-league? I know you were saying indoors one of your first games obviously was Hucknall Hinckley, and I equally know that not that it's non-league, so please do not take this in. So Forest isn't the only commentary that you do at the same time. I remember just before the Jeff Hurst thing, you were going to Mansfield for a game late last year. Visiting all these different places outside of Forest, does that still excite you to go to?
Yeah, it really does.
Variety.
The variety does. In terms of non-league football, I got, my playing career got as high as Melton Town in the Central Midlands League, second team. So that's kind of, they're my roots. Everybody has their roots in grassroots, don't they? Yeah. And so that's kind of my roots. In terms of the broadcasting career, the other week, I went to Harrogate and did Harrogate against Forest under-21s in the EFL Trophy. That was fabulous. It was a great evening, even though Forest lost. But love that. I'm still working towards ticking off the 92. I'm still working on that. So as many grounds as I can get to, and I've been to a few in non-league as well. As many as I can get to. That's what I want to do. I love football.
Are there any this season that you haven't been to that you are this year?
Well, Harrogate was a new one.
Yeah.
and that's it. Unless we get a cup draw in the FA Cup.
Yeah.
Because the other under-21 games are Carlisle and Accrington, both of which I've done. And obviously done the Premier League ones now as well, having had last season. So there was a few last season. I haven't done West Ham, I haven't done Tottenham, hadn't done Brentford. So there was a few that I managed to get ticked off last season, which was good.
What's in the 92? Is there one specifically you haven't done that you really want to?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, most of them are lower league. They're either League 1 or 2. I think the one that probably I really want to do for kind of a little bit sort of history is Cambridge. I've never done Cambridge United, and they kind of had that accolade for a long time of being the smallest ground in league football, and obviously that was kind of before regular promotion and relegation from the National League, and it's kind of like, but that when I was growing up, it was kind of like that made it a little bit unique, and I've never managed to get there. So probably I think there's 8 left, and probably that's the one that I kind of most like to get to.
Oh, when you get some spare time, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to end this with a question I know you're going to hate, because I hear you get asked it all the time. Last year it was, are we staying up? And I know as a fact from our chats that there were many ways to talk around that. This year, obviously, I know we're only a short way in, and it's 5 games down, 8th in the league. How do you see the season playing out for you at this moment?
Promising signs. I think the transfer deadline, the transfer business, with a lot of it coming on deadline day, the transfer window business I think looks strong. Obviously the loss of Brennan Johnson is a big blow, but it needed that to happen to fund some of the other signings, including Ibrahim Sangare, who I'm quite excited to see develop as a Forest player. I think the front 4 that they played against Burnley, I suppose they played against Manchester City, they might, I don't know, but the front 4 they played against Burnley I thought was very exciting, young, quick, super pace in that Forest side. And you look at some of the other, Felipe is a class act, and just injured at the moment, but if they can get him back, I think they've got some very, very good players, some quality players in there now that they have taken almost the next step. Now, I'm not saying that they're 8th and they're going to stay there, but you would like to hope and think that they can have a little bit more breathing space between themselves and the very bottom than they had last season, and it'll be a bit less stressful. Well,
fingers crossed, because that probably makes your year commentating on them a little bit easier at the same time.
A bit less stressful, yeah.
But Colin, I'll let you go, since I believe you might have a drive to a stadium in Manchester tomorrow.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for coming to Carlton, and thank you for doing this interview.
Absolute pleasure.
Cheers.
Thank you.